Oh, thank you very much. Apparently, I was just muted for some reason. Um, yeah, so welcome to the stream. I just doing intros anyway, so hey, wait a we have a first timer. There we go. So, as I was saying, I'm Vanessa. I work on a webcomic called Radio Silence, which is going to update actually tomorrow in a couple hours, and I'll be working on that after this stream. But for now, I'll tell you about Radio Silence. It's a queer coming of age web comic, a drama, romance. It's got just about everything in there. It's about a British rock band's rise to fame and all the drama that comes along with that. It that will be updating at midnight in a couple of hours. But for now, I'm doing Dungeons and Dragons art. I put together a pack for fellow DMs. I did a ton of DMing over the last couple of years, and I'm now down to DMing for one group. One group having my focus is way more manageable. But for any DM out there who needs an art pack of characters, maybe you need some ideas, wants to grab one of these that um, uh, it might spur on some ideas, or you might just need some characters to throw in there, and that's cool too. It's better than stealing art off the internet, and I'm looking to provide some more. This pack that I've been working on the last couple of streams is the Alluring Villains one. I will have 15 characters, and one of them you're seeing right here that I finished. Um, and it, just about done anyway, for her. This sort of fey looking woman. Labeled her as like a wood elf druid. The packs that I've done, the first one that I did was a townsfolk one, and I provided, uh, the slimmed down version with just the icons that you can get, straight up, really affordable. I plan to do the same thing here, where it's that and the like I did last time, a PDF with a whole bunch of information, stats, rollable tables, uh, sort of things that you could just branch off of and use. It doesn't have to be that character, but it was meant for that character. And as planning on doing the same thing here, I have a bonus character who I made this whole thing of based on a Celtic myth. This and submitted it for a project that never picked it up, which is totally fine because I can just reuse it for this. She'll probably be the cover, and I haven't revealed her yet because it is a secret, but maybe by the end of the stream we'll see. Yeah, there'll be 15 of these, and yeah, the plan is to have another PDF and another slimmed down token portrait icon thing for this one. So we'll be working on that. I think I have four more to color, I think. And so, oh yeah, the teeth. I I definitely think there's some stuff here that could be pulled upon. Hey, thanks for following. Uh, that can make any DM's imagination go wild. It's gonna be great. I would love to see what people do with them. I'll probably put them. The last couple I put up on Roll20 and Coffee, and I didn't put them on DM's Guild because they require an exclusivity. I kind of wanted to keep, the property of my own art, so went for that. It would probably get me a ton more sales to put it on there because I don't have that huge of a reach, but that it is what it is. So I will show you guys what we have so far and where we're going from that. We've got this lovely woman, and yes, teeth and this whole like stepmother vibe. I'm glad you picked up on that. I love where we're going with this one. We've got classic tabaxi assassin type, um, there's definitely not enough, variety in that kind of stuff. So having a tabaxi is, I wanted to vary it. And then we got some celestials. Now we've got the ones that would have a bit of a body horror element to it with multiple eyes. But if you know anything about biblical angels, that kind of creepiness is not unheard of. Love to see where people would go with this guy. And then a more classical, uh, angelic celestial type, although he has very interesting aspects all in his own, definitely. And then, hey, thanks for following. And then we've got a Goliath barbarian. I have a soft spot for Goliaths. Um, and I think this guy would be a very interesting foe for, and potentially because I'm not your DM. Whoever picks these up could possibly make them as a possible ally. It's one of those things where you could throw them in there and see how the party reacts, and if they go in Leroy Jenkinsing it, that's one thing, or they could go in and try to make allies with someone that you threw in there to be adversarial, and you never know. That's one of those things about DMing. I get that vibe from this guy. Like, if you got on his good side, he'd be a great ally, but man, if you were on his bad side. Uh, we've got a noble vampire. I had to throw a vampire in there. I had to get that kind of vibe, and he's got like the slitted eyes. You know there's more to him than just that. We've got one of my favorites, which is this like halfling ghost child. Um, Definitely have thrown in this kind of vibe for my players before and traumatized them, so I think other fellow DMs can. There's so much there. There's so much you can play with that horror aspect. Oh, we've got some layering. We've got this leprechaun dude. I absolutely love how this guy turned out. He's got a vibe to him that I would never trust if this guy showed up in my campaign. No way would I take anything he's saying at face value because holy crap, there's something up. You gotta know there's something up. We've got something with a bit of a broken nose halfling. I went for here. He just has something up with him. He's probably recovering from the broken nose badly as he doesn't set it properly, and he's got the little bruises. Another one where I feel like this could be one of those guys who you throw at a party and you don't know if they're going to latch on and think, wow, he's pathetic, I love him, well, we are going to adopt him. Or this guy is a skis and he's going to take us for all we're worth. We better just kill him now and get rid of that. And then, yeah, so we've got the rest that I have not colored. Might take her on first. It's a very ambitious one to be doing first, but a tiefling noble. You gotta throw in those higher class people who could or could not be some sort of antagonist. And let's see, we've got an old woman, bit of a crone. You never know what to expect with something like that. They're trying to be unassuming. And then a dwarven woman. There's a lot to that. Yeah, Fantasy Lady Macbeth is definitely a vibe. The the dwarven woman, I loved doing the little sideburn like braids. Gotta have the variety. You gotta throw in some stuff that's unique to, you know, things that you don't see really in fantasy stuff. And then we've got some sort of sea hag or a mermaid type character. I love her little teeth. Yeah, maybe we'll start with her. Let's see. Probably starts with some sort of greenish blue for the skin. I am very much looking forward to developing my story that I have that involves a sea hag. Let's see. That. So I kind of riffed off of that when I was already in my mind as things were going for this design. And of course, variety has to be inserted there for the types of terrain. I don't feel like there are enough opportunities for showing off of a character's like swim speed or doing underwater battle. There was one that I did with my groups in Waterdeep because one of the side quests was that they were sent to find out why there are these sightings of a bronze dragon in the harbor, and they were supposed to figure out if it was, you know, up to something. Generally speaking, bronze is a good, lawful good, in fact, type of dragon, but there's always exceptions. And that ended up being Zalafarn. It's a beloved character that I played multiple times and was love interest multiple times. People loved her so much, but they, when they initially got down there and went down underwater and the like, they were attacked by creatures, and it was probably the first time for a lot of them to actually fight underwater. And the rules are different because some of the marshals there were finding that the weaponry doesn't work exactly like that. If you've ever been underwater, you know that swinging a pool noodle through the water will, has a bit of drag. It's not going to work the same way. That's a specific type of weapon. Yeah. So, I feel like encouraging this kind of vibe for other DMs out there who might want to get into that kind of thing. If any of you guys done much underwater fighting? Because all I can think of is the instances that I've actually facilitated. I've made them as the DM. My character is currently on a boat masquerade party at sea. I'm looking forward to seeing if that will turn into any water-related fighting. Let's see. What kind of color should we go for? Good. Some palette. So we've got that kind of greenish color. What would look good with that? Sure. Yeah, let's go for her. Let's bring in this kind of color. Oh, you know what? It'd be a lot easier to not have to do this minute detail. Gotta lean into your tools. I was trying to get audio working for some background sounds, but since Twitch has some strict regulations on that, and I work on a Mac, they don't actually make it very easy for you to do that kind of thing. Because sure, there's a soundtrack, but you can only get that when you're on PC. You can stream it from a browser, but that doesn't distinguish the other sounds from your computer from that kind of thing. Ooh, I like where this is going. Let's see. Yeah. I was not expecting it to go this way, but I do really like orange and green, so this is kind of an adjacent palette to that. Works. Let's see. Let's leave that there. Do we want creepy eyes? Dark. Dark everywhere. Inverted. Could do inverted. Get kind of like purpley gray going here. We'll see how that looks. Whew, that's actually terrifying. I might not keep these if that's the case, but maybe it'll work. Let's see. I can add that in with a different layer instead. Oh, you know, good. Just go for something like that. Really offset this. Make her really unsettling. Might need a different color, but oh yeah, that is super creepy. That is something you do not want to see coming at you through the dark waters. Yeah. So there's specific weapons that work well underwater, and most people don't take that into effect when they're plunging down potion of water breathing and all that, sure, but then they forget that maybe the marshals will be a little shortchanged with a couple of the weapons. But good thinking with that. People need to plunge into the depths more often, that's for sure. And nope, of course not. Can make her skin a bit more mottled. What were we thinking for? Yeah. Interesting. We've got seaweed going down her shoulder and her hair being that texture. What do we look for? extremely quiet without music, and I'm apologizing. I tried so hard to figure that stuff out, but I was not 100% sure, and I did not want to get everything muted from doing it wrong, because apparently there are very few actual tutorials on figuring that stuff out. For Mac, anyway. But that's okay. Put on my best DM voice and tell people about campaign stuff. Yeah, that looks cool. I missed some of it. Probably gonna be bouncing around because I love figuring out the colors, but also I have the horse color sense, so I might just kind of put a couple of these characters aside and then jump back to other ones. Let's see. The tiefling. This one could be really fun. For her, I was thinking classic tiefling with the reddish skin. Maybe an orangish red, like a burnt umber. Ooh, that would be really cool. Okay. So we've got like a burnt umber color for her. What are we thinking? Yeah, we'll go with some pretty yellow to complement. Of course, she's got to be a bit of like a splash. She is a high class after all. There's got to be some of those royal colors and some bling. There we go. Mostly I was aiming to make characters that I would absolutely have no problem finding a place for in my games, but I'm hoping other people see it the same way. Possibly giving them more ideas, as DMs can get kind of stuck cycling around the same kind of characters. If someone has me make up a shopkeep, it will probably default to some sort of thing in my head that I have of how I play shopkeeps. But if I can pick up something like this, like a pack, that will spur on it a life of its own, and then the character can kind of feel like more, uh, you know, like a person instead of a stereotype. Instead of like, oh, okay, there's your voice that you use for all of the shopkeeps. This is our nurse Jenny. Officer Jenny? Yeah, Officer Jenny. Nurse Joy. God, it's been a while since I watched those, but oh yeah, that's very striking. What a graceful woman that this one is. Let's see. And some like purples. Purple is. She's not quite royal, I don't know. Probably no more noble than royal, but she needs that aesthetic. Oh, you know what? Pinks. We got very delicate pinks. Offset her lineage, that she might just be playing up a certain look. Like, oh, darling, I would never do something like that. It's dreadful that you would ever think me capable. And then, of course, she's already done worse. change those flowers for sure, but let's do more of like a delicate. No, that's a bit too much. Something like that. I mean, the brooch could also just be in the shape of and not actually be flowers. Be gold or silver or something. This is extremely difficult for me to come up with colors in front, especially in front of an audience, but we just doing it. Do it live. I feel like she needs like a tea party quality to her. Nice delicate green. How do I want to do it for this? Or for this? Or the rope? The rope probably could be gold. Apparently I have not put a separation between that and that neck, so I gotta be careful not to hit fill, or that will be a bit much. I do like those colors together, I just don't think that would be where I would put it. But you know what? Flatting colors is a thing. Get more like a lavender or something. Excellent. Brings out her eyes. These beautiful little flowers. And of course she has the crown, which I might have made a mistake. Yeah, I did, didn't I? Did some merging of layers and did some fun errors of that right here. So it'll be fun to fix. Oh, that's alright. Had worse. She seems more of a golds than a silvers. But she might mix them up. Do some like... let's do another layer. So I can change my mind later. And if you're coming in late, I am working on characters for an NPC art pack. So these will be available for people to buy. I mean, I'm not going to stop anybody who wants to use them for their actual character in a tabletop RPG. That is for your DM to decide if they are somewhat fitting for your world. They're just made for tabletop to be shared and used with, oops, inverse there. There we go. Keep that there. This will be the villains pack. I don't know what theme I will use next time, but I will probably run polls. So far I've done townsfolk, and this is the villains. Probably do some like thieves guild types or factions related. I think that will be good fun for people to be able to incorporate some factions into their campaigns. Maybe being able to pull some allies if your player has the like urban bounty hunter background where you gotta make a new contact in every city that you go to. It's annoying but also useful. If you're a player, you definitely think that it's one of those useful backgrounds to take. If you're a DM, you're like groaning internally because, wonderful. Yes, of course you have a friend here. Let me just check my notes. I could go very, very ordinary for her hair color. I could go something like wild, considering. Sometimes an, it's a good thing to have some people who are more ordinary looking. You know, in the terms of a fantasy world, anyway. The unassuming types that you come across, so that the players underestimate them or estimate them exactly the amount that you want them to. Not everybody's a BBEG. Some are minor villains, some are people you just want to throw in there to be squashed, and everybody gets catharsis squashing the town bully who thinks they are all of that because they are the highest in the pecking order at this little town. That means nothing in the great grand scheme of things. It will just help to be able to see all the flat colors, and then I can make some adjustments later. Exactly. Sometimes just Dave. Honestly, there was a paladin named John. His surname was something pretty ordinary too, who was one of our allies in one of my games that I was playing in. The rare occasions that I'm actually playing instead of running. He was a wonderful ally, just with a very ordinary name. But also, who says that's ordinary in that world? Maybe Dave is actually a very unordinary name. It's very unusual for someone to be named Greg. And then you've got like David's son of David, and all of the Davids that came before him. A long line of Davids. I like the idea of this character being some sort of like stuffy, spoiled type. Maybe makes like a pact, finds some ancient power within herself that's related to her lineage, for a Sork kind of vibe or a warlock vibe. Maybe no magic at all. Maybe she is the type to have a gigantic weapon. where she is more of a poisoner of words, of secrets. More roguish, or bardic. All the possibilities are there. It's just whatever the DM sees in the characters that I'm providing. Whatever works for their world and the instances in which they need these characters. And then we've got the little flyways. Not sure what to do about the horns. Darker or lighter? Might go lighter. Might make them look kind of like the tips are on fire. That white hot. Maybe even blue. Like it looks like it's going to be extremely uncomfortable to touch them. Just instantly sizzle your hand. Let's make our eyebrows a little darker. I do like me a thick eyebrow. I use those pretty often. I'm very excited for the day when I have a couple of packs going and I can have some feedback from other DMs. Maybe people have specifics. They're going into a really cold region and they want all sorts of characters who might be, traveling merchants, people who are work in the mines, hunters. I do kind of strive to draw a lot of the more ordinary types because you do need them more often. You do meet them more often. And a lot of the times everybody who is DMing already has some sort of idea in their heads of a where they're going with their like BBGs. They're not going to pull them probably from a very ordinary pack like mine, but who knows? Because even as the DM, you don't know. You don't know who they're going to pick fights with and bully, like the game I was talking about. Them bullying they're on a little ship for this masquerade, and they're bullying the poor bartender who has a keg that makes these admittedly scary drinks that we roll on a table for the result. And man, some of the effects of those ones can be pretty brutal. That doesn't mean the man did it on purpose. Doesn't need her scorn. We need more knights and such too. We need some city guards. There are always guards, and then there's always the player who asks for their names, and then there's always the most random of names that will ever be pulled out of you or pulled out of you in that moment. I could do the ropes in the same kind of white yellow. Or the white yellow. Is that gonna look good? No. Well, like I said, it's easier once things are flatted to change the colors. It's harder to see it when you're not actually applying it anyway. Coloring is difficult. My color theory is not the best, but I certainly will give you the most autumnal, earth-toned version of what something could look like. And we have certainly 4 of them to go, so can't really be lagging. I really do want to get this out and published soon. I have a lot of coloring to do for my next comic page as well. So I was saying at the beginning, I make a webcomic called Radio Silence. It is a queer coming-of-age drama. It's about a rock band, a British rock band's rise to fame, all the drama that comes along with that, and the people who are trying to ride on that fame, the people in their lives who've made their lives hell or coming back or crashing through their lives in some way. But ultimately their own selves are the worst perpetrators of antagonism. If that's a spoiler or not, I don't know. It might be more of an opinion at this point, because I think people hate Tom and Sammy way more than they could ever hate, quote unquote, or see the characters in the band as antagonists. Yay, shortcuts. And drawing horns, let me tell you, I found a 3D model that someone graciously offered for artists in order to do exactly this, to draw horns from specific angles as you turn the head. And there's no way in hell I would be able to figure out how to do this twisting and move it to this side from that angle without something like that. So kudos to artists helping artists. That is the whole point of my my art packs, after all. We all out here helping each other succeed and be our best. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, that's for certain. You have better things to use your time on. And for DMs, I want that to be doing prep for your games. Now, I have an orange bias, so this might end up being one of those things I chose only because of that, but come on, it looks so cool. Welcome. I'm glad your bike worked out. Just about to figure out if this was just my orange bias or if I should make these look like they're on fire. Oh, wonderful. Way to go. You were trying to adult and you kind of just you hit a double instead of a home run there. What color would look good with this? Make it kind of like the silver. Like it's gilded. That would be super interesting. Who knows? No, everything can be extra clean. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe not. Maybe. I don't know. Picking colors is difficult. Yeah, the best part about NPCs is that you as the dungeon master are going to be putting in characters that you would hopefully want to play, whether they are antagonistic or not. And being able to choose from something that someone else has sparked an interest in, given you something to work with, like these, I should hope helps in whatever way. If I do that now. Doesn't really have as much impact. Well, anyway. Don't worry if this looks weird for now. It's not going to be everywhere here. Just like the texture. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Stop switching layers on me, man. I didn't click it. What you doing? Now if I get rid of my orange bias and make these instead a little more in her colors, what would that look like? There we go, put that. As a royal, what kind of gemstones are we going to put up here? I want to pull back in some of this green from down there, so I think I'll pull those up into her crown. Her tiara. I don't know. Who knows what people are going to decide that is. Everyone has some sort of... No, see, I didn't do that either. What the heck? Where are you, crown? There you are. shading is one of those things that you just need to practice a lot of and look at a lot of reference to be able to pull it out of your head. Even still, I'm like, oh, I wish I should have just pulled up a whole bunch of reference. But I'm sure I'll refine these later off stream. This is just for funsies. Lips. Oops. Could go darker. Fuller, maybe. Doesn't really stand out enough. See, I'm not a makeup person, so I cannot do makeup, especially at the top of my head. But if we're going for a more natural lip, then I would understand. I could go for something more pink. Something along these lines. And I cannot unsee that as like a little mustache right now. I gotta do the lower lip in order to fix that. And the teeth, probably. That'll help. Do not quite white. I always go for white when I'm going for more cartoony, but this is my way of letting loose and being able to do things as detailed as I want to. Yes, exactly. Minor illusion it. I don't remember what I was doing with this specific outfit, but I am getting an idea. Pulling in one other color down there. Perhaps back this. She's got almost a Princess Peach vibe, which is funny to me. If I bet something like that, you might just draw the attention back down. Partly, this project is one of those things born out of well, boredom, but also it's one of those things where if I spend this much time making my own NPCs for my own games and they end up being like a couple of them have been in the past, where I expect that it's going to go one way and then the party kind of either mistrusts them or mistreats them or does something where completely unexpectedly they're not important anymore, and I felt like, well, I spent this time on this art, don't know what I'm going to do with it other than, I guess, post about the possibilities of what this NPC could have been. So a project like this was good to channel my energy into something where multiple people could find use for these characters, and all is not lost in some folder in my computer forever and ever. as the DM, you want to be invested in your characters because you might be playing this character for years alongside the adventurers. But you also don't want to make the mistake of hinging everything on your what would become your GMPC. You don't want to put that pressure on someone that the party could easily decide is not important. Because boy, that has happened. Entire plot lines lost. But that's okay, I say, tears and eyes. We'll go that way. Oh, she's turning out interesting. I might still end up changing these horns. I'm not quite convinced that's the right call for them. Maybe just gently turning that down. But then again, I can't spend too much time on each individual one, or it won't be worth my time having done this. As they are just supposed to kind of get my character creation urge out, therefore, you know, gotta push them out the door. Get out there. Go make a party's life miserable. Find some bunch of adventurers. And go bully them. I believe that was supposed to be part of this. I think she accidentally has a bit of Willow vibes, but I can't help that because I've been drawing that character a bunch for the last couple of years. Fantasy lip gloss. A woman like her could definitely afford it, if such a thing existed. Or maybe it's all an act. Maybe she doesn't have any degree of wealth. She's actually just a charlatan. Being the drop on everybody. So, ignoring things that might change right now. I say coloring in an area that probably will change. But maybe not, because I might just want to move on. I would love to color this hair. It's quite fun. So we've got her. We have the old crone. And we have the mermaid, which is half colored. Who am I missing? Ah, the Dwarven woman. Dwarven woman's also an option. And then I have my half-body special character, Babanshi. And she'll probably be the cover, very similar to the one that I did for the first pack. How I had one prominent character and the rest were kind of off to the side. Being mysterious, being one of those things you gotta unlock to get rid of the silhouette character. But I have not previewed that one yet. NPCs are those very interesting aspects of a game that can sometimes make or break it, or you could continue the game in spite of whatever NPCs are being thrown at you. The one of many failed games that I have been in the DM was obsessed with putting in pop culture references as DM, like not DMPCs, but like I guess some of them kind of were, but NPCs for the most part. Like a Tony Stark and Tony the Tiger, and apparently a lot of Tonys. Tony the Rakshasa, sorry. And that was definitely one of those. In spite of what you're doing here, we will continue to approach your plot as if this wasn't absolutely ridiculous. We'll try to give this the seriousness it should have, but you insist it does not. It has unfortunately happened multiple times for me that GMs will self-sabotage with some very silly characters for levity, or very silly things like that just end up being embarrassing, like Nat 1 means your character pees himself, haha. And I wish I was making that up, but man, that one was rough. Just made it feel not good. It's like, it's one of those 3.5 kind of bullshit things that, you know, you swing around so wildly, lose control of yourself, that you hurt yourself or your companion. You're like, oh, man, I really don't think my level 11 character that, you know, has been training for this long is that inept, nor would they have lived this long if they were. So can we please cut the pretense of that kind of stuff? Or ways of making it engaging and fun without making it patronizing and ruining the suspense with some childishness, not even silliness. Kobolds can be a lot of fun, and the ones that you had certainly had personality. But also, to fight me, you would need to get up to my level. I am far over leveled from you, sir. I'm out of your CR. Yeah, I'll leave her for a bit. I'll probably finish these off on my own, because that's a lot of fiddling and it's not going to be very interesting to see the progress. Probably a bunch of people here now that weren't here before to be able to see what I have, as well do a recap again of the project. So from the top, this is Standard Array, which is an NPC art pack for D&D for tabletop, system agnostic. You can use it for whatever. And there's a pack that will just be the tokens and the portraits, and there's a pack that will include, meant for 5e D&D, the stats of for the characters, like a generalized suggested stat block, a bunch of names and potential items or secrets, powers, spells, like very custom spells or something. I don't know. I haven't written them up for these guys yet, so who knows? But there'll be a one-page document for each one of them that'll give you an idea on the fly or in advance to prep for it. And this one I think will have 15. My set number 1, which is all townsfolk, has 10. So this one might be a difference in price, but the final pack might be the same price, like the PDF pack, because the set 1 has 2 sets of art for each character, whereas this one will only have the portrait in order to make more characters. So yeah, so like we started off with earlier, let's go back to the top. We got that. We've got those 3 of them finished. Alright. Preview of some of the ones that are in this pack. So this very fey wood elf druid woman, which I very much love. I would love to see her and what shenanigans she gets up to, and the evil stepmotherly ways, as was mentioned earlier. We've got a tabaxi assassin. Ours character that I've repurposed, and it's an AU basically. But yeah, it's your boy. But it will also be everyone else's at that point when I throw it out into the wild. Which is fun because I feel like a lot of the more exotic races don't get the attention as deserved. There probably is a ton of art out there that could grab for. I mean, I know there is of elves and such, and especially humans. But if you're looking for a tabaxi rogue, you're probably going to find the same 3 pieces of art that you're stealing from someone else's, personal character. You might as well pay an artist a little bit in order to use a character that you know is made for you to take and use into your world. We've got the nice, body horror type celestial with very many eyes. And I can't wait to write out a stat block for. I was thinking about the powers and the types of things he could do with these eyes. I didn't want to make it too much like a beholder or something to that effect, but it would kind of have a similar but more celestial flavor. There have to be more celestial like enemies, which I'm glad for the new anthology book that it was announced. That seems to be giving us a couple more, because there are currently, I guess, 9 or 10 celestial stat blocks and 150 fiends. So good luck making a devil versus angel sort of campaign. with those those stats. Speaking of which, we've got the celestial, a more traditional type of celestial that you would come to expect. Handsome and debonair. We've got one of my favorites, the Goliath Barbarian. Got a bit of a tribes person vibe going on. Very curious to see where he'll end up. A noble vampire to throw very ordinary nobles in, as well as the one that I was working on. And nice halfling ghost child. My my players would know that I've had fun with little ghost children and little doll children and the like, so I would love to know where she will go. Spook people. We've got her, the tiefling, we were just working on. I can't wait to see how she turns out. We've got this absolutely untrustworthy looking leprechaun dude, aged and a little pervy feeling. I don't know if that's just me, but. And we got this ragabond kind of guy, ragamuffin. He's just got like his like broken nose and these burst blood vessels near his eyes, black eyes. We have the old crone, which I might work on next. She might be pretty easy to finish. Definitely do not trust her. Yes, sure. You want to come in so I can stop repeating the same pitch? I'll bring you in. I've got this dwarven woman, and I have the mermaid that I was working on. And I will bring in my co-host so I can stop talking so much by myself. There you go. Welcome. No, I have to get the voice switched over to, because you're not coming through to the stream yet. Mm-hmm. Alright, I think that's working. Alright.
Hello.
Introduce yourself. Who is the stranger who has just popped in?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's working. I gotta mute stream though, because now I'm gonna end up hearing myself. Mar. I co-host relatively frequently. Hello, stream. I have a way higher energy level than V does, and I apologize.
That's fine. They've had their chill hour.
They've been allotted one chill hour to enjoy. The rest is now definitely not as chill. Where's my panel thing? What? Go.
But yes, I am a higher CR than you, therefore.
No, you're not.
You would have a hard time.
You hear that?
I hear nothing, no.
You don't hear anything?
No?
Okay, good. Practice. Because I don't have to go hunt for the software to make sure that you couldn't hear that.
Yeah, no, I don't hear anything. Which means that they don't hear anything, because you're coming through with, through Discord. So how is it that you see, from your perspective, which I guess is more of a player one, NPCs? When an NPC is introduced, is there always like a certain... Can you tell if a DM
has
means
decided?
To... Yeah, it means that there's like something to these characters.
There's I feel like it depends on the dungeon master. I feel like there are some dungeon masters who won't really give any description to NPCs outside of like sex, hair color, well, presenting sex, hair color, and race.
Hmm.
And sometimes with those DMs, you don't really know. Sometimes you can end up making the players could end up making the NPC
Yeah.
because the players have decided that I like this one DM, I'm keeping this one, and the DM goes, well, shit, okay, I guess that's a thing now, and now I have to go make this. Um, and then other times it
Hmm.
really could end up just being a throwaway. It could really end up being something that the DM just thought of on the spot because you asked who was around, and their only purpose was to give a funny voice and either exposition or not exposition, and the players move on. Um,
Yeah.
and to that extent, it becomes really difficult because when you make an NPC, you make an NPC. There's no kind of ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're just gonna have more information on it, and depending on the DM, um, whether or not they're okay with that NPC just not existing or not being a part of the campaign, they might give them the same treatment that they give every other NPC. Um, but to the same extent, you can inverse that where a DM likes to go into relative detail about NPCs, and because of that, you can't tell whether or not this particular detailed NPC is important or not.
Yeah.
Um, I also find that there's a tendency to not let an NPC exist in a manner that is out of the way, right? So I'll see a lot of DMs. What they'll do is they'll introduce an NPC parallel with the story. Like, oh, you walk into that guy's room to talk to a person and he's already talking to someone. And then the person you went in to talk to introduces that this is his, I don't know, coworker and his name is this, and the coworker shakes your hand. Like there's an introductory parallel that can happen
Yeah.
where NPCs are introduced as a part of an association to the story, and therefore you kind of already know to a degree, not always, but to a degree, that these NPCs are going to have some sort of importance or something like that. Because a DM could just as easily say, um, "Please wait outside while I'm done talking to my colleague," and then that guy leaves, and you come in, and then it's almost like no interaction. So there's two very different levels of introductions where you can kind of feel out whether or not an NPC is going to be important
I would
based
feel
on
like
how they
the one
introduce.
that I would feel like that there's more to the character who just left that we weren't allowed to hear their conversation. That was like a foreshadowing moment.
Yeah, it could be. It always depends on the DM. I think I don't, uh, and for better or for worse, I don't think many DMs really get to be as sly as they think they are, because when you play enough with your players, they're gonna be able to tell.
And if
Like,
you haven't played a lot of these players before,
then they might not.
you you might have to, you might have to be more heavy-handed. You don't know
That's very
how.
true.
I've had definitely had instances where I'm like, okay, they definitely didn't see A, B, C, or D clues that were progressively more obvious. So I guess I have to be a little different with my approach with this because they were either new players or they just I'm not
That's
used to
very
their
true.
style of their.
Yep, absolutely.
Mhm.
This comes down to, uh, as we talked about before on a previous stream, you and your players and or your friends, depending on whether or not you pick them up from the internet or you pick them up from your internet friends, because COVID made the real world no longer exist.
Yes.
So it can really depend on the people, because you might have somebody like me who, when I'm tuned in, I can pick up on everything.
Right.
Um, in conversations or stuff like that, because I'm hyper into it, but I also have the problem of just completely being scatterbrained and absent sometimes. So you might have a player who is not necessarily disinterested, but is disassociating to a degree. And then you put something in front of them that their character likes or wants to do, and they cue in on that, and now all of a sudden they're picking that apart with like intricacies, with really really deep intricacies. Um, and those are the players that you end up having to be a little more light touched with, because you know they're going to dig into something. If you say there's a vial of red liquid sitting there, the first question is going to be like,
Can I taste
okay,
it?
does it smell? Can I taste it? What's its viscosity? Is it eating away at the container? How much is there? What does it look like? And then you have people go,
What
you
shade
you
of
have end
red?
up having, yeah, exactly. And then you what's the RGB value? And then you have players where you say there's a, there's a vial of red liquid on the table, and they go, oh, okay. Do I recognize it? No. Oh, okay. I want to go over to, and then they just completely ignore it.
Yeah.
And
And you're like, all right,
yeah, and to a
that was
degree,
that was there from your contact, but now you're gonna leave without it.
yeah. So to a degree, it really does depend. And I think the longer you play with the group, the more click clicking you end up having, where the group kind of learns your DMing style,
Hmm.
and the DM learns how the players play. So you end up being able to actually subvert expectations, because it's that whole, I know that you know that I'm thinking this way because I've done it very frequently before, but this time I'm going to do it differently.
Yes.
And you get like a couple of those in a campaign, kind of the couple of like twists that you're able to do. Um, just because you do it once, now they're gonna look out for it forever. Then you go back to the previous style, and now all of a sudden they don't get that twist anymore, and they're like, oh, this guy's good. This guy's good too. This guy's good too. This guy's good too. And then it's like, where's the bad person that like we
Oh
had
no, we missed them
30
somewhere.
sessions? Yeah, like that we had 30 sessions ago, and meanwhile you as the DM are like, no, there's no bad person here. Like,
Here,
so
yeah.
yeah. So when it comes to NPC introductions, I definitely think, um, for the DM's own sanity, not to have NPCs they worked on for a long time just go by the wayside. They're going to be a part of the story, or they're going to be a blockade in the way of the story, or they're going to be recurring enough to force interest, or something along those lines. And I don't blame DMs who do that, because when you put that much work into an NPC, you want them to be a part of the story, and it's whether it's up to the players to directly interact with them. But that doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean that that NPC is just going to poof out of existence. It's kind of like a Paisley, right? Like if we
Hmm.
didn't want to associate with Paisley, she would still be in Trefford. She still would have showed up to meetings. She still would have, because she's a part of the world. It's
Yes.
just she's not a part of our world. Um,
And there was a whole potential there that was lost, and I would make you guys see it because I would make you see the character multiple times from afar because you would have rejected her or whatever, like untrusting or whatever. Uh, but still see her, and then that probably would have seeded into you guys having suspicion because why does this person keep popping back up? Which would have been fun too. I could
yeah,
play that any which way, but as a player, it's always nice to do the courtesy of understanding which character is actually the one that your DM means for you to be, you know, latching onto or interested in some way, instead of doing the opposite. Which some people get to that point where they've played enough, but only enough um, to be able to see that thing and see it. And I've had players who are like, no, I'm not going to interact with that plot that is quite obviously what the DM wants me to do. I'm going to go over here. And you're like, so you're
yeah. There's a
intentionally
courtesy,
being a
definitely.
brat.
Yeah,
Yeah. But uh, there's a balance because if the NPC that they're introducing genuinely, I mean, your character wouldn't be interested in them, or there's a reason why your character reacts the way they are, then that's probably what they were trying to get out of you anyway, the DM. It's not like they're gonna be introducing as I finish this villain related pack. They're not gonna be introducing friends all the time, obviously. Some of them are gonna be antagonistic.
yeah. It is, and uh, rather unfortunate. But it really also comes down to like as a player, you have to respect the DM's work, even if you know.
Mhm.
Like the point of playing D&D isn't to always not know what's going on and always have to be fed stuff by the DM and constantly be uh, stimulated with new interactions and occurrences
No.
and all that sort of stuff.
Sometimes
It's like
it's
if you know,
seeing how it goes, seeing how, even if you knew or you think you know how where it's going and you go along with it, you might be surprised to find out that, whoa, okay, there was a lot more to this than I anticipated.
yeah, and it's really tough because you as a player you don't want to diminish the DM's work. Like you don't want to be like, oh, the DM obviously wants me to do this, I'm not going to do that. Or the
Right.
DM is obviously wants me to do this and I'm going to do that, but I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get attacked or something like that. So I'm going to have my character pull out their weapon in the middle of a hotel that doesn't have any reason to be pulling out their weapon. Um, and it's stuff like that that is classified as metagaming. And people just don't understand that to a degree where it's like you as the player know what's going to happen. And that's fine. That's okay because there are stereotypes and there are situations that are tropes and stuff like that, and that's okay. But the respect comes from not pulling out your weapon because you know it's a mimic, and it's like, but your character doesn't know it's a mimic because your character has never seen a mimic. It's never heard about a mimic. Oh well, in the lore and stuff like that, mimics are common mythology. It's like you're telling me about my world now.
Yeah. No, that's when you
And
politely ask if you could do a nature check or whatever, or a history about the creature, because you, the player, could know about the creature, but you are now asking the DM, can I have permission to see what my character knows?
yeah, and that's okay, but because there's a difference between telling the DM that, oh, it's common in mythology
Yeah.
and asking the DM if you would know about it, because one is telling a DM how their world is running and the other one is asking if this is how their world is ran. And
Yeah.
it's such a big
It's
respect thing.
respect for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fine that your character might be on edge because they have some weird premonition sense or something like that, but to a degree, you know, you need to play your character within the boundaries of the world because what if it's not a mimic?
What if mimics don't exist in this world?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I would have them
And
roll
it's
it, and then they would get really excited because they got a really high amount, and then I'd be like, "You're aware that of no creature known as a mimic. They have
yeah,
never or like existed in this world." And then they'd be like, they would deflate because it's like, "What do you mean? I rolled really well." Yeah, and I'm telling you,
exactly what
they
you would
don't.
know.
Yeah, they don't exist.
Yeah, and it's really difficult because you can end up as a player, you can end up making you okay? Um as a player, you can end up making your DM very adversarial because you've decided to try to tell your DM how the game is run. You can end up having the DM turn around and just being like, nope, not a mimic. You've just decided to attack a door in broad daylight, and
And made a fool of yourself, and now
yeah, and
how do you
it's and
feel?
it's it turns it into us versus them because maybe it was a mimic,
Mm.
and now the DM has decided it's not because you went ahead and metagamed the information towards your character, um, and your character's like, but I saw this, that, and the other thing. Like the DM's like, yeah, and they're gonna transform it into you were hallucinating rather than that's actually how it was, and
Mhm.
there you end up having this whole respecting of what it is, or you can see what's going on, or you can see what the DM is doing, or like all that sort of stuff. The point isn't as a player to beat the DM or to beat the mimic before the fight happens. The point as the player is to have fun with the fact that your character doesn't fucking know what a mimic is.
Yeah, I don't think that's explored often enough by players because they want to be the best at everything when you should focus on what is your character the best at. Your character is not every character is a jack of all trades. Even if they are a bard, they are going to have specializations. And so you're not going to be good at everything, and that is why this is a party and not a solo campaign.
Hmm. And that's also why I feel, and why I kind of look back on my younger self doing dungeon DMing. Stop building characters who start off with an 18 in a stat.
That's no fun whatsoever. You
It
want you want to be able to strive for something.
I The problem is, and I feel like a lot of people might agree with this. The problem is everyone goes, well, I want to start off really, really, really strong because I'm not going to take ASIs when I level up. I'm going to take feats.
Right.
And that is a problem with 5th edition
Mm-hmm.
because they don't offer any growth customization outside of subclass and main class. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. If you don't do feats in your game, your character doesn't change at all except for the railroaded line that you get for your class and your subclass. And that's not fun. There's no way to uniquely grow.
Yeah.
You're a phantom rogue. You're gonna grow the same way every other phantom rogue in the game goes. Or you're a this character or that type of class or
Yeah.
whatever. You're gonna grow the same way everyone else does.
I will
You
continue
know,
to
out.
point at fourth edition and say, hey man, we had a way better system of customization and back then, and they just decided to streamline and put ASIs and feats together in the same thing, which ugh.
Yeah, it's not fun because you end up having the problem of like, well, I want my characters to grow in their stats, but I don't want to be the same rogue everyone else is.
Right.
So you end up having the problem of people go into the game bloating the stats to high hell as hard as they can so they can take feats between now and when they want to where the game is going to go, because the stats that they end up with level 1 are the stats they're comfortable being at level 20,
Yeah.
which just it doesn't work. You end up having way too high to hit modifiers or way too high con levels and way too much imbalance in the party. You're gonna have one person with 10 con and one person with 18 con, and it's like the dude with 18 con is the wizard because he's just like paranoid that he's gonna end up dying.
Can we
You end up,
also, on the same, like, in the same breath, point out that it is okay for a character, when it's in the story, a character who isn't the best one at this skill, that doesn't have the best modifier, is allowed to roll for it? Because they're the one being asked by the DM, okay, you're the one who's decided to swipe the item off of the thing. Okay, you roll sleight of hand, and then someone piping up, I have +7 to sleight of hand. I'm gonna do it instead. How about you help me? And it's like
yeah,
because
that's another
you're
huge
half a
issue. I
block
agree.
away and
Or
not
not even
involved
half
in
a
this
block away.
scene.
Even if you're standing right next to the other
Yeah.
person, they have not communicated in any way their
No,
intentions.
this
They
is
have not done
their
anything. It's in their head,
yeah.
and
Let,
it's
let
the
this
DM talking
character
to their brain.
yeah. Let this character do what this character has asked like to
The
do.
DM to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel honestly, I feel like the help action just needs to not exist.
Yeah.
I
It's
I get the point of it, but it really does become a just advantage bot, because once people figure out the help action exists, they use it on everything.
well,
And we've
especially with
tried.
familiars. I
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
hate it.
And we've tried to balance it out. We've tried to say, well, you need to be proficient in the skill check in order to help someone, or else you're just going to make it worse.
Yes,
And
which
it's
makes
like,
sense.
it still ends up becoming an almost no fail situation. I honestly, I don't like the help action just because it really does turn into just an advantage farming situation where the DM had set an AC for a single attempt for a single roll, and now everyone's going to use the help action. And people will argue, well, that's what the help action is for, is to more likely succeed at something. And it's like, I get that, but your DM has already set the difficulty level under the single person attempt. because they can't set it under double or advantage roll attempt, because
You can't
when or if it's
assume.
only
Yeah.
one person does it, they're more
Thanks.
likely to fail.
Yeah. Yep.
It's
Exactly.
yeah, it's really tough. I honestly think the help action should not be an advantage roll. I think the help action should be adding the proficiency modifier of the other person to the
Yeah.
roll. It should just be a flat addition. Like, if, for instance, if you're level 20 and you've gone through some shit and you have a 6 proficiency bonus and you want to help someone, they should get a +6 to the roll. Because the average with advantage is +5. You're level 20, +6 makes sense. But if you're level 3 or 2 trying to help someone lockpick and you've literally just picked up lockpicking proficiency like 2 years ago, you're not going to have the same help that someone who's level 20 as a rogue is going to be able to help someone else. That's like saying my help is just as worthwhile as a level 20 rogue's help. You get advantage regardless. It's like, that's,
Yeah.
it just feels cheapened. Because if at least then, if the DM in the back of the DM heads decides like, I don't really want the help to do anything here. Like, I did this specifically for a person. Like, I did this specifically for someone I took away that I locked up and I knew they weren't a rogue, and I did, all these things, and for
Mm-hmm.
some reason in the game that's not how it went. Then it gives the DM the advantage of, this is what the DC was, I'm going to add 2 to it, or I'm going to add their proficiency bonus to the DC to level out the help action, because this wasn't designed for that.
Yes.
Because you can't do that as reliably when it's an advantage roll, you have to add a +5, which is really high, and it's just gambling with a second dice roll. At least with a flat one, you always know it's going to be a flat
Yes.
addition to the roll, so you can bump up the DC to exactly what that flat addition would have been.
And
Um,
God forbid, like you have somebody like we've played with, who will ask what the DC is before they've made any roll, because they want to figure out if they're going to add this or that, or
yeah,
they're going to try
talking
and
about
find
like
some
they're
maximized
poke.
way.
Yeah, they're poking for information because they want to know if they have to waste a spell slot on bless, or if they have to do guidance, or they have to do like all of these things.
How
Like
about you decide right now? Like, I'm not giving you any additional information that your character doesn't have.
yeah, and the worst part is when players have a tendency to over analyze something because the player thinks there's something on it.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I'm checking for traps on this door. No, there's nothing. Okay, well, can I look under the door and like see if there's a tripwire behind it? And then like you can tell when a player is like dead set on, I know
Yeah.
this door is trapped, or even worse, when a player has found or not even when it's been advertised, the module that the DM is running,
Oh no,
and they decide to go
that's
find the secret doors.
I feel like that's just grounds for kicking them out of the.
Termination, like out of
Yeah.
the game.
If you're
It's
metagaming
one
to
thing.
that level,
It's one thing if you've already done the module before
but
and
still, if you
like
agree to
you're
do it
aware
again,
of it.
you should be
You
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
because it's not
aware.
just you, right? You're not the only one in the group. You know the secret door is there, so you immediately going to investigate the second you step in that room
Hmm.
removes the chance for anyone else to have found that secret door who didn't know it was there and would have got the actual pure satisfaction of finding the door,
Yep.
because you're like, I'm gonna investigate the room. Like, okay,
I'm gonna do this
well, you were under
suspiciously.
attack.
Uh,
Like,
yeah, it's very specific, suspiciously specific thing.
yeah,
Um.
like the north side of the room or something like that. Yeah.
Hmm. Yep. Let people's characters do what they want to do, and as long as it's not impeding on the actual party, like let people
Yeah,
play their characters, but also play a character, not a
yeah,
game.
not game. Yeah, play your character, not yourself in that situation.
Hmm.
Which there's kind of like, all right, well, some characters are just an expression of yourself, so that's, but
Yes, I don't think that's quite the same thing, but yeah. The interesting thing about that. Okay, so back to NPCs, since I was trying to make this about NPCs to stay relevant. The when you can tell and when you are actually interested in an NPC, what is it that you do to show your DM that, like, do you continue to go back to that person? Do you involve them in the character's like thoughts, in their actions, calling
My
them?
my best respect that it, because this comes down to a, how do you make it worthwhile for the DM to have had that NPC involved, right? Like it
Yes.
comes down to, uh, I understand and see you made this NPC, and I want you to be able to use them, or I want this, to happen. For me personally, it's, I want to I want to have the NPC work within the realm that the NPC belongs to.
Yeah.
Like, you don't go get the butcher and take them out on a fucking dungeon crawl, right?
What about the tea
You don't
boy?
take. Oh my god. Okay, well, the point being is, when you discover that the NPC is in a niche, they do a specific thing. The
Mm-hmm.
best way for me to give respect to the DM is to work whatever niche they're involved in into an advantageous situation for the party based on what we're trying to do. So, for example, I'm just going to pull a random scenario in my head.
Okay.
Um, let's say you're on the shoreline and you're a part of this. You've just gotten into the shoreline city, and it's hustling and bustling, and you end up going down, and the party is super cheap. Like, they have money to spend, but they don't spend it because they're hoarding it for like magical weapons or like stuff like, uh, later on in the campaign where they actually want to blow their money. So they're really, really, really cheap. So what they end up doing is they end up going to, let's say they're, well, looking for dinner. They're trying to do something relevant to that. So they go to a place that's like super, super cheap, and it's a family-owned business. It's a family-owned restaurant, and the family runs the restaurant and is a part of the fishery. So it's kind of like a double thing. So they go out and they fish. They come back and they put the fish in the menu in the restaurant.
Sure.
The restaurant is a very generous term for this location. It's basically like a bar.
Mm-hmm.
So they go down there, and the DM has known the party is super cheap, knows the party needs to eat, and has already decided to make an NPC who is, a part of that bar, or is a waiter or a waitress, or one of the family members or whatever. And I, as a player, have picked up on the fact that this NPC is something that the DM has put effort into.
So clearly
Turns
there's
out,
some sort of thinking to
well,
it.
so turns out we're in this location because there's a uh, some sort of old dragon tale of bronze dragons, or no, copper bronze dragons living off the coast, a couple days out. Um, and the bronze dragons haven't been seen in, a couple hundred years, but legend has it that, you might be able to find a stash, right? You might be able to find gold, or you might be able to find some sort of magical weapon stash. Who knows? But everyone knows dragons hoard things.
Mm-hmm.
Me, as the player, goes, oh, I know of a person who has a boat, who goes out in the ocean fishing, and was a part of that restaurant. And they don't have a lot of money. Their product is super cheap. That's why we went there. So my job, air quotes, my preference is going to be, I want to go back to that location and get that NPC involved in borrowing their ship, and like taking the risk of finding a potential dragon horde, because
It'll
the law in
change
the
those
land
people's
dictates.
lives.
Yeah, the law in the land dictates that if they're taking you there, they are a part of the expedition. They get a percentage of the cut when they find the goods.
Mm-hmm.
So you go out, and so me to show respect to the DM for making and creating that NPC with the intricacies that they have, because they talked about their likes, their dislikes, their haircut, their past, all this sort of stuff. Like the stuff that you can like kind of improv on the spot, but also there's definitely stuff that can only be known because they worked on it. Like they worked on specific aspects of what they know about the town and like other people and all this sort of stuff. So I'm gonna go back there. I'm gonna grab that guy or gal, and we're gonna try to convince them to go out on a ship, go on a 3-day journey, like over the weekend or something like that, and risk some money that they could be making at their shop to go on a dragon adventure.
Now you know
And
me well, right? So, what do you think I'm thinking right now about this story?
pirates.
No. I'm thinking if that was all set up by you especially, that family that's been living there are the dragons. And they are very interested in taking you out there. Oh, yes, because they will kill you for having tried to come after their treasure. They are living in squalor because they want to, because it's fun to be pretend like they're
Yeah,
human.
yeah. I mean, it depends. If we wanted to go that route, I wouldn't have them be the dragons who used to live there because copper or bronze dragons are lawful good. If we wanted to go that route and we were collaborating, I would say,
Ah, yeah,
um,
lawful, but that's theirs property, and the people
I
are
would
trying to
say it would
steal
be
it.
a different. I would say it would probably be a different scale dragon who was also trying to hunt the same thing,
It,
but found out
yes.
that humans have settled nearby in the last couple hundred of years once they got word that, oh, the bronze dragons have left the region, and they're like, oh hell yeah, we're gonna go take their horde, and they start flying in, and they see this, maybe they're younglings, maybe they're not ancient dragons that could burn down a city, maybe they're adolescents who can polymorph into older people, and you can cue that up with the adults not actually acting like adults. Yeah, and yeah, you could totally take them out there and have one of them immediately start a fight once they actually find it or on their way back or whatever, and have them transform into an adolescent red dragon or an
Mm-hmm.
adolescent blue dragon or whatever. Um, because that sets up a whole weird situation of like, okay, we need to defend ourselves, so we have to kill this person, but oh my god, this thing had a family, right? Now, how do you get the boat back
Mm-hmm.
without telling, like, it's one of those interesting things where now the antagonist isn't necessarily the dragon that was going after them. Now the antagonist is, how do we get back without pissing off the other potential dragons?
Uh-huh.
And do we need to worry about that? Because we could just step into town, they could find out about it. What are they going to do? Transform in the middle of town?
Right.
They're gonna get attacked from everything, not just us. So yeah, you can set up that whole thing, and that's all because one of the
Yeah.
players decided we knew somebody who was in the situation, which
Mm-hmm.
again is a very obvious demonstration of the NPC exists because it's a part of the plot.
Yes.
Because I knew if I presented this to you and then presented this to you, you would double back, go to here, and be a part of that. Um, but sometimes that's not how that works. Sometimes people will go to the docks and they're like, I don't want to involve that weird like person who is like super poor and stuff like that. I want to get somebody who's like going to be able to defend us
I
as
want a
something goes
yacht.
wrong.
I'm not going in
Yeah,
in that guy's terrible little boat.
yeah, and as a DM, part of you ends up going, well, okay, it's not like I made this NPC for this situation or anything.
True.
Um, but then you can just rub your hands together and do maniacal laughter and be like, okay, now when you get the stuff back,
Hmm.
and they're gonna fucking all the dragons transform, grab the stuff, and run off. Like,
Exactly.
oh my god, that guy at that shop was actually a dragon.
I was
Like,
instantly more suspicious of that than thinking I was actually genuinely going to help these people. Like, what are you
well,
doing here?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that's because you've played with me, but in this particular situation, no, life just sucks for people sometimes,
Yes, it
and
would have been
it's the
more
whole
surprising to me if yours was genuinely just
yeah, and
they
sometimes
were
you got to do that,
people.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, switching up the expectations with your players that have played with you.
Yeah, because the the people aren't going to be the antagonists in this case. It's like the whole going up the mountainside. It's how long are we going to be out at sea? How much food do we have? How much money can we take? How do we prevent ourselves from getting lost? Because the only person with any proficiencies of driving the boat is that one guy. So what happens if what happens to that one guy and gets seasick, or like gets malnutrition, or gets sick, or like something happens and they're out of commission? How do we figure out how to get back? And how do we prevent ourselves from being attacked by pirates, because we're very obviously just leaving, not going to the fishing grounds? Like, there's whole bunches of situations that you can put your players in that aren't necessarily combat.
Yeah.
It's
And
making sure you have enough food,
I mean
even.
that it's a slight tangent, but when they say 8 encounters a day, social encounters and environmental encounters are counted into that. So the fact that the environment does give them pause and makes you roll skill checks, that is technically an encounter in
Mhm.
Wizard of the Coast's eyes, anyway. And sometimes
my
that's what a character is made for.
Yep. My big thing about the whole encounter, that whole system, is that if you're going to have combat involved, have at least two separate combats in a day. And my reasoning for that is that you have to give value to the characters who have short rests, like as their thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't have two or three, battles in a day, then the person playing the fighter, or the person playing the monk, or the person playing the warlock, they're not gonna have what separates them from everyone else. Because the reason why they have a limitation on what they can do is because they get it back between fights, and it carries over into the next fight when they get it back. So if you only end up having one battle and then they go to bed, it's like I, I'm at half capacity now because I burned all my stuff in that fight and I got it all back on a short rest, but then we didn't have another fight. So there was no point in getting it back. Now I'm just limited to what I can do. Meanwhile, like the bards and the wizards and everyone else who has all their stuff on a long rest,
Or like,
they can
yay,
blow
good, let's go to
everything
sleep.
in a single fight. Yeah, they can blow everything in this single fight and have no repercussions because there was no follow-up fight.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as a GM when you have to look at what kind of characters are in the party that you're like working with, and looking at it, and if you're like, okay, there are both long rest and short rest people here, then you incorporate it. If everybody's a long rest person, then it doesn't really matter in that instance. But
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the thing about it is you run into you it also actually becomes kind of difficult to balance encounters in that way, because it's like, okay, they're gonna do a dungeon crawl. Hmm. Well, if they don't know that it's going to be multiple encounters, because it was something that you didn't set up to be something they knew was going to be combat. Like, let's say, oh, you walk into the shop and the floorboards fall out from underneath you. You fall 500 feet into water, like take like all the damage except for one bludgeoning damage, or one health, whatever. The point being is that if they are shunted into a situation that they didn't know how long fights are going to be,
mm-hmm.
you need to be really careful about how you handle that. Because if you set it up as 3 or 4 fights, but before you've only had 1 or 2 fights, you might end up having your long rest people blowing all their resources in the beginning, and then by the third or fourth fight, they have nothing.
Yeah, they're worrying,
And
they're frantic.
yeah, and to a degree, like I said, it depends on the DM and it depends on the players and compositions and stuff like that. But it can finally give a purpose for these short rest players to actually shine. And it's like, now the DM has decided, I know they burn all their stuff in the first fight, their first 2 fights if they're not left over because they're really overzealous. And I have a couple of people who have short rests, like benefits. So I'm gonna make those players shine by having like 4 or 5 combats. Because what's gonna end up happening is the short rest benefit, the people who benefit from the short rests are gonna end up being the protectors of the people who are now completely burnt out.
Yeah. let them shine for once. Especially when it's marshals, man. That one time when you had the mines that we were going down into, and my character being forced to come back up every 15 minutes and then have a long rest in because
Yeah, because
oh no,
they
we've
burn
used
out.
all our resources, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I haven't
I
done anything.
twitch.
I haven't done
I can
anything.
still hit things.
Let,
Yeah.
put me in, coach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of respect on both sides. It's a lot of work for the DM. This is the reason why not a lot of people become a DM, is because if you want your players to have fun, you got to put that type of work in. If you're not willing to put that type of work in, then don't be surprised when your players are just kind of like floating along and not really getting invested in anything. And to be fair, some people are just like that. No matter how much work you put in, they're just gonna float along because they're
Yeah,
maybe they just
floating
don't like D&D as
around.
much as you do, or
Yeah, that's one of those tough things too, is finding exactly the type of people who jive with you.
yeah, yeah, and
They want the same thing you want.
yeah, it's hard to be a DM in general. I don't know how I would make it any easier. Um, Especially when you're doing homebrew stuff, because you don't have anything to fall back on, but on the same level, you don't need to worry about working within Rails.
Yeah, you can always change things. I've found it more difficult to work with the modules than with homebrew stuff in general, because it's with the module you're worrying about. Um, did I just mess up the entire flow of every thing that I
Oh
needed to
yeah, this one
happen?
guy becomes
Because
your friend, and then 30 pages later, he's like, he was an enemy the whole time, and it was like, oh no.
hmm,
Well, he's not right now, and I didn't plan on that happening. I don't think the players are going to be happy about that, so he's not anymore. um, Meg says, it's interesting because as a player in a majority of our games, no one knows how many encounters we're going to have per session. So it teaches us spell slot preservation as opposed to just blowing everything right off the bat. I've always enjoyed it because it makes us as players think about our actions more. I agree. The interesting thing also comes down to what type of encounters are you having? Because if your DM is putting like, if your DM is putting glass cannons in front of you, which is we need to do all of their health as fast as possible because they're doing half of our health and damage a turn.
right, but once we hit them, they go down. Like,
Right.
yeah,
So you end up having the issue of like the DM is kind of like pushing you to use your bigger spell slots, because if you don't, then you risk not doing enough damage in a short enough amount of time. That is what I mentioned there is a very, very dangerous game to play though, because your players might see the encounter, might try to uh, might be reserved in spending their spell slots, even though
well, they
you're
would
kind of
lose
trying to
pretty.
push
They
them
would learn pretty
along.
fast. Especially if they lost, but they would learn pretty fast to assess the
Yeah,
situation better than to the old reliable.
yeah, exactly.
But you, as the
Um,
DM, it's your job to not just absolutely wipe the floor with
Crush.
them. You have
Yeah,
to. You can teach them that lesson without, crushing their spirits.
yeah, and a good example of doing something like this, and again, this is the reason why being a DM can be tough, is that okay, I need my players to know that this particular thing is a glass cannon, right? I need my players to know that it only takes 12 to 15 points of damage to get the thing not to be knocked down. So what you do is you set up an encounter where there's only like maybe two or three, not enough to be a problem, but enough though that at least one of them can get a hit in or an attack
It's a
off or something like that.
nuisance, yeah.
So that when I say, okay, barbarian or fighter who has 38 hit points, this deals 17 points of damage, and now the party knows that these things are like, oh no, bro, like these are bad, but there's only a couple of them. and then they figure out, okay, they don't have a lot of health.
Mm-hmm.
Then you put in the fucking Zerg rush with like 10 or 15 of them or whatever, and
Yes.
it's an encampment where the party gets the drop on the enemy, and it's like, okay, they don't seem to have noticed you. Okay, cool. How many are there? Like 10. And the party goes, what? Like, yeah, there's 10 of them. It's like, and everyone starts looking around like, if they all hit, they're gonna do 170 points of damage in a round. Like, we don't have that much health.
Yeah, so we gotta go nuclear basically if we're gonna do this.
Exactly.
The interesting thing there, like I had recently with the encounter that you helped me balance, that they, in the world that I have that is low magic, um, everyone is apprehensive about using magic. Now
Mm-hmm.
they came across a creature that has a resistance to non magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. So when the fighter and the barbarian start to wail on these things, and they are like little like bats that are flying around, spitting fire, and they're not, and they're like frustrated because they're killing like one out of the like little horde, and then from her hiding spot, uh, in the tent because she's afraid of fire, the cleric just flings like a guiding bolt, and it just incinerates the entirety of that entire horde in that spot because they weren't seeing. There's no language that was expressed, um, other than actually, I think I did. I think was giving them the hint that it wasn't, they're swiping their sword through, and it's not as effective as they would have
You
liked
hit
it to be.
them, but you can feel it kind of like
Yeah,
bouncing
you are
away or
you.
deflecting.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is a still a horde. You're swinging your sword through, and you're cutting the wings off of one and like bumping into another one. But they weren't picking up on the fact that, or they didn't want to act on it because the world lore, right? But one did, and it did the same amount of
Wow.
damage as 3 rounds by that point worth of two people swinging at it. Then it was just like, oh,
Oh.
oh,
And the
that's
beautiful
why
thing about that,
we almost died.
the beautiful thing about that is, and I try so hard as a DM to tell my players, think outside the box, please. You're not locked into to your weapons. You're not locked into your actions. Like, you can do anything. Like, you don't have to take the 2 or 3 action, things that they give you,
Mm-hmm.
because if it was in that situation and they were like, well, all right, I need to do 8 points of slashing damage to do 4 points of damage, and it's like, yeah, okay, can I oil my weapon and light it on fire? And I'd be
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, you can.
yeah.
Hell
Here
yeah,
we
you
go.
can.
Well, not for those
Like,
particular creatures because they're
yeah,
resistant to fire.
they
But
are fire.
yeah, they are fire. They
But to
would love that. They
overcome,
would eat it.
yeah, to overcome that resistance to the non-magical attacks, you don't need a magical weapon. You don't you don't have to be like, oh, boo-hoo, I don't have a magical weapon. My DM
I'm
is
not at the
ganging up
level
on
yet.
me, and like, yeah. It's like, you don't need a magical weapon. You just need to make your weapon do either more damage or an alternate amount of damage. So
Yes.
so by thinking outside the box, you have oil for your lanterns. You have a matchbox, like a matchbook. I will 100% let you take an action to light your sword on fire.
Yeah.
Hell yes, absolutely. You'll do the standard amount of damage plus a d4 of fire damage every time you hit, and it'll last for a minute. It's not a permanent weapon enchantment or anything like that, but you dumped half of your available resource for light into a weapon. Yeah, I'm gonna reward you. That's great. Do that, like, and do that to overcome. But as a player in the moment, you're not really thinking about that,
No, it's very
and
difficult
sometimes
to stop and think, especially if there's people who are breathing down your neck that their turn is next, and
they're frothing at the mouth because
yeah.
I have a thing I've been wanting to do since last turn. um as a DM, it's kind of your responsibility to let your players know that.
Yeah.
And sometimes just ask, like, one round goes by and be like, hey, you guys can, think outside the box. You have a bunch of tools, there's a bunch of stuff in your backpacks, see what you can do with it. And if
Mm-hmm.
they're not getting the idea and you have something in mind, there's nothing wrong with, when a player's turn comes up, going, hey, I have a cool idea of something you might be able to do. Do you want me to let you know that it's a possibility. Because if they're like kind of getting beat down, if they seem a little discouraged,
Yeah.
asking them if, to impart some information on them of something they can do to give them an idea, because sometimes it takes a little bit to get the ball rolling, especially at the start of a campaign.
Especially
And
when you're
they
learning your
say,
character and
yeah, and they say yes, then yeah, you just straight up tell them, and
yeah.
you just straight up say it's going to take an action to do this, and they're
Yeah.
gonna be like, oh, that's really cool, and it's gonna be like, what else
Hell
can
yeah.
I do?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
DM, can I light the bush on fire? I was like,
You absolutely can
yeah, absolutely.
if you have a way of putting it out after. Otherwise, you might set a forest fire.
Well,
But if you're thinking that's the only way, I mean, go
yeah,
for it. Yeah.
because it's like, what if we're in the woods or something like that, and somebody has control water, and there's a lake nearby or something. It's like, all right, can I like, you know, uh, can I light this bush on fire and try to shove the creature into it? And as DM, because these aren't conventional actions, it's up to you to determine whether or not, someone has the capability of doing that in a turn, and then working through your own head what the rules for that might be. Because you can go, no, you can attack it, light it on fire, and then you're going to take your next turn to push it in. Or, as the DM, you can go, you can drop your weapon near it, that'll light it on fire. And since that's a free action, you can then shove the creature into the bush while it's on fire, but you're not going to have your weapon. So there's that level of like, how dedicated to this are you? How much are you willing to risk? Because you drop your weapon, depending on the creature, that could be a bad thing because they might pick it up and use it against you. It's on fire. Like, now you're going to be taking the extra D4 fire damage. But if you can keep the creature in the burning bush, they're going to take damage. They're going to be on fire. They're going to take damage at the start of their turn. They're going to take damage, like, if they don't move from it. Like, you can set up all of these things around, the player's actions. And I think that's awesome. I love environmental. I love it when people use the environment to work to their advantage, knock down a support beam to drop boulders on something or something like that, because it makes the game feel more like a role-playing game and less like a turn-based Japanese like video game.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's my turn now, I'm gonna do the swing, I do damage, next turn. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not.
That's why when I'm watching like let's plays and stuff like that, and people like doing live D&D or whatever, the combat, I if I can, I'll skip over it. I just want to find out how it ends. I'm sure you guys are gonna win and whatever, but holy crap, it usually takes like 3 hours worth of everyone fumbling and doing things
Yeah,
that are either misreading of their abilities or whatever, and you're like, oh, this is painful. I can't.
yeah, and that's the bane of being a DM, is like, you know the rules,
And
because
so
you kind of have
do
to,
I.
and then oh my god, and having to watch other people play and not following the rules, to a
I'm
degree.
not
There's
even one of
that.
those like my
It's not.
rules
Yeah,
people, but oh
it's
my
like,
god.
no, this is a basic part of your class. It's like a barbarian forgetting they have access to rage.
Right.
It's like, you haven't raged in like 2 combats. Oh yeah, that's right, I have that. And it's like, oh god, no.
It's not even like that would be actually ridiculously painful. It's like it's more of the minute detail of you didn't do anything last turn, so your rage should have dropped right there. But you
Yeah.
didn't remember that basic thing about your class.
Yep.
And now everyone's letting it slide, which is fine because that's their DM and they can let it slide, but it's still like
No one noticed
one of
this,
those
and it's
things
a very
one of
odd
those things
part.
when you're
Yeah.
a DM or when you're a player who has played a lot of that class, you can't not see.
Yeah, yeah, and that's tough because you end up forgetting that it's kind of supposed to be all about fun,
Mm,
and you end up getting stuck in the, like, this is,
mini-mixy.
yeah, how this
Just
is how it's supposed to be run, and it's like, it can be really difficult because I don't know, the rules start becoming a gotcha system, or they start becoming uh like about limitation and limiting the players and doing all this sort of thing, and it doesn't need to be like that.
No, and like you said, if it's almost a surprise when people think outside the box and actually roleplay during combat, when it shouldn't be because it's in the title. It's a role playing game.
Yeah, 100%. And it's because it's actually so structured that people have a hard time doing things outside of the box, because the box is so detailed and squared. It's like, why would I ever do anything outside of this? Look at all this stuff I can do within this box,
Mhm.
because it's over structured. I loved the system, air quote system. I love the thing they did for Ashley when she did her one shot. They were like, okay, yeah, you don't really know 5e that well. You don't really know the rules. Let's like just make it really simple. You just have a turn and you do a thing that takes a considerable amount of time, and you can do a thing that takes like not a lot of time. And that's it. That's all it is. That's the turn. And I adore stuff like that because it doesn't put guide rails and it doesn't put boundaries on what you can do. It's literally something that takes 6 seconds and something that takes like less than 3 seconds, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because
I
maybe you swinging a dagger is like really fast and takes less than 3 seconds, so you can do it 2 or 3 times.
yes, convince me though because the players that we have played with would absolutely like they've tried to sell me on playing like the fate system, which is similar to that where you basically argue I should be able to do this, and I absolutely would never want to do that because people have
You've
proven
played with,
time and time again
yes,
that they even within the
we'll
constraints of
doormat you.
D&D they'll make it so that they're doing 50 things within those 6 seconds because they've decided that's what they can do,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
anything
100%.
less is stifling their creativity.
Yeah, I agree. It really comes down to being able to balance respect for both the DM and the players, and sometimes people don't understand that trying to min max or trying to do the stuff like that can actually be considerably disrespectful for the DM, because your entire purpose is to go as fast as you can, and that's not enjoying the game. If you can just blow through everything without consequence and always succeed, that's not that's not fun. There's no consequences. There's no possibility of failure. It's a role-playing game with dice, because the dice are supposed to help dictate whether or not you fail. And when you've just decided that you have a plus a billion in everything, then it's like, well, then I'm not going to bother putting anything with DCs down, because you were going to beat them anyway. So now everything is just open season. It's like, oh, the door's locked, but you managed to get it open. Oh, there's like this weird smell in the air, but you can identify that it's a pretzel stand. It's like it loses its complete like purpose of failure when you just get everything. And that's why it's really difficult for me to play with people who've been max, because it's like, no, the whole point of the game is to fail. It's meant to be a roller coaster, so the good times are good and the bad times are bad.
Hmm.
And the DM wants that because they want to put you through toughness so they can build you up and make you stronger and make beating things
So that the
cathartic.
goods can feel good and the bad obviously
Yeah.
feels bad in comparison.
And it comes down to trust. If like you don't trust your DM and you think that they're just gonna constantly drag you through shit with no reward, then just don't play with them at all. You can do that. You can just go. You can just leave.
Yeah. Yes, take your
Yeah,
baggage with you.
yeah. That's, but you get players who are just like super chill and they want to experience the story you have to tell. They're not gonna try to skip over the story at all. They're gonna want to be involved in the story and want to have the ups and downs and build it with you. And those systems work great for those type of players. But then you have the other people who are like, no, I need a rigid system because I need to know how to beat the rigid system. It's like, I'm not the DM for you. Some DMs eat that. They eat that up because it
Yeah.
gives them the opportunity to throw bigger stuff at them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
everyone has their own preferences, but when 90% of the time I feel personally, when a DM is very story based, it feels very breaky the story, which isn't very fun.
No.
And it also kind of removes fun from other people. Like, you're really good at this stuff, cool. That means no one else is going to be able to do it, especially if you're constantly saying, I have a plus whatever modifier to this ability, I'm going to do it. It's like,
Yeah, which is
yeah,
comes
but
back to the
like, what
point that
about
I was
everyone else?
making, where I would specifically, if that was the case, and if my character, if it makes sense to my character is doing it, that okay, but that's nice for you, but this time is my time to do it.
Yeah,
But you're gonna roll badly, and look how interesting it
that's
will
part of the
be.
game.
Look how interesting it will be if something bad happened
Yeah,
because I rolled
I
badly. Like,
and I love Nat ones.
yeah.
I absolutely adore Nat ones because they open the doorway to such just ridiculous things.
Mhm.
And everyone will say, "Well, you can't critical fail in this. That's not a part of the game." It's like that doesn't matter if it's part of the game or not. Like, you can
You
you
can.
can drive all you can just make things go completely to left field. Like, if you trust your DM to do that, that's the important part. Because you're like, let's go to left field because now this is happening, I guess, and just completely derail the next 3 sessions. And it's like, it's gonna be a moment when 3-4 months down the line, you're like, dude, you remember when I got that nat one in that city, and then
I mean,
I
this is two
like
years later,
accidentally
but I
discharged that weapon, and
yeah, I still say that with the double nat ones with advantage that I got when trying to
have
inset
feeling
her
like she was
own
being
friend.
abandoned.
Yeah,
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 yeah, that was a
that was
really,
excellent. Yeah,
yeah.
and it just becomes one of those things where you obviously have to just trust your DM. You have to trust the fellow players. A lot of D&D is trust, and you
Yeah,
just need
100%.
to because it's all a collaborative storytelling, and it is all
Hmm.
like yes, that yes and
Yep.
situation that you should be adding to and not taking from other people and their story.
Yeah, and let's face it, like, most good DMs, they don't want to kill your characters. They
No.
really don't, because they've invested so much work in a storyline around your characters.
Mhm.
Why would they want to kill them? That means they need to start reworking things about, like, people that this person would know, people that this person would meet, the people in this backstory. It's like, when you kill a character off, you kill a part of your game. And
Yeah.
DMs don't want to do that because it's just going to make extra work for them. So don't feel like that when your DM does something that, is damaging to your character, or is like possibly extremely detrimental to your character. You always got to keep in mind that if,
Maybe they're just trying to challenge your character also
yeah,
because that's not a bad thing either.
yeah, absolutely. Like in my game, I beat your characters down mercilessly because you guys were getting involved with things that were way higher than your level because that's just what the world was doing. But like, when you guys got beat down so bad, eventually you went to a region where people were like, far away from the situation, and people were disconnected, and they were like, we're having problems, and you guys beat the living crap out of a lot of the problems
Mhm.
and
It
got
was
stronger.
cathartic. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it kind of puts into a scenario like, you're here in the world, there are things weaker than you that you can take care of to protect those even weaker than you, and then there are things that will literally kill you in a single hit that you've met and ran away from. And
Exactly.
I feel it's important to have both sides of that, because that's what makes the world feel real. Because, as I've said before, at least in video games, I really don't like worlds that grow up around you. It's like, wait, this guy, this bandit from this town, like, 30 sessions ago, did not have 80 hit points.
Well, sure, but what if you got stronger? I like that whole the new Critical Role campaign that they just released, the Nether Deep one, where it has the rivals that will grow up alongside you. They will do the tasks if you're not going to, and they will beat you there, and they will get the rewards instead of you if you don't stay on the actual modules like
Story
intent.
path.
Yeah, and then you could use that as a motivator. You could use that as some like, characters to team up with. They could be your complete enemy like enemies to the grave kind of like.
For me, the issue stems from if these bandits have 80 hit points and the NPCs are just as strong as they were 30 sessions ago, how have these bandits not just completely raided and destroyed the town? And you know, you can say, oh well, they're different bandits, or oh well, they have a different personality, or well, they would never do that because they would never get all this sort of stuff. But it's those questions, it's those things that can really feel disconnected from the world when you have all of these problems getting bigger and bigger around them, but they're in regions where it's like you could just nuke it. But if they went to these regions and these regions only had, you know, bandits who had 10 hit points and they come back and a bandit tries to take them out and they just open palm, like slap them across the face and bruise the entirety of the left side of their face, they're like, okay, never mind, and they're gonna leave because you've gotten so strong you can literally almost kill a bandit with your bare hand.
That's why I feel like they should go. You should have people return back to places where they started, because it'd be very interesting to for that place to stay the same and people to have known them before, and to be
Yeah,
incredibly impressed at how strong
and
the
that's the
characters
reason
are.
why I don't like doing the whole things get stronger around you as you go. I prefer to have things be as they are, because if you go in a region that's going to kick your butt, then that region's going to kick your butt, and you want to get stronger to come back to that region to solve the issue.
So
And
you like, I know that you don't like open world as much as it could be like an open world, because
yeah.
in that case it would an open world would be an open world if you guys didn't go to town A. Well, then town A by the time you guys are level 5 will not be written for level 3s. It will be written for level
Mm.
5s. But if you had and you came back, then yeah, it will grow to where it was level 5 now.
Yeah, and it depends, and in that case that's kind of the DM smoke and mirrors, like pro- provocative not provocative pro wow, I cannot think of the word.
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of it either, but that's because I've been streaming for like 2.5 hours, and I'm probably gonna be finishing up soon.
Yeah, but that's the DM's jurisdiction about basically whether or not they want to make that town level 3 or level 6, because they could easily make it level 3 because it's in the region where, you know, the level 3s were, and they want to give the party a little something something to get in. They can like beat the crap out of stuff, get a bunch of gold, and be like, wow, this is easy, and then move on to the next one that's actually level 6, be like, oh. But you know, um it's up to the DM's discretion about whether or not they want to do that, and that's good because that gives them the opportunity, you know, because they might want to drop it down or not. But I feel like to a degree, you're never really gonna see any progress as a player character unless the things around you change. You're never gonna feel like you've gotten stronger when every combat that you go into does the same amount of percent damage to your health. Does the same, like, all that's gonna happen are the numbers are just gonna get bigger, but it's gonna be the exact same style of combat. Like, if you're gonna go into a combat and it's gonna be these types of creatures, it doesn't matter that you're gonna slaughter them and it's only gonna be 2 turns. Give the players the 2 turns of slaughter. Like, let them feel like, oh man, I remember when we fought these types of like underground
Only if they're the
cave
same
creatures.
types. Otherwise, I mean, what the world is made, and the cap of the world is level 5, and these people are level 8. They're just gonna keep going out there and grinding things. They are the BBEG now.
It depends on the DM. I just say it's like, as a player, it feels good to understand that you are getting stronger because the things around you will stay the same, and you can compare yourself to them. You can go after and you can hunt animals and you can hunt these, like, you know, maybe there's these big bears or something like that that this particular town loves to eat and celebrates with, and you know they haven't had any hunters that go out and do it, and you went out and you got your shit wrecked, and then some mission comes along 10 or 12 sessions later to go back into that town, and you're like, hey, remember those bears? Yeah, let's go fight those bears. And you go out and fight the bears, and it's like complete 180, and now all of the bears are scared of you. Now it's up to you about whether or not you want to go on a genocide against these bears. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can now slaughter these animals, and it's got that like, yeah, hell yeah.
Got her
It just,
revenge
yeah,
on them
it
regular
just
gnolls.
regular knolls. Yeah, it feels good to know that like you've had growth because here's the same creature you fought before and you beat the crap out of it now, or even
Yeah, but
that.
what you could do is start to include those, but they are the minions now. And you're like, oh, if these are the minions, and yay, I'm switching the minions really easily, who's the
Oh yeah,
one
you can
who's
scale up.
controlling them?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because
You can
I
absolutely
remember
scale
when
up.
these people were the biggest
You went
threat.
with the goblins, right? And the
Yeah,
goblins were the problem, and then the goblins got a boat, and then the people controlling the goblins got on the boat, and then the
yeah.
tenors went like, no, we out. It was like, wait, they're level 10. We're level like 4. Oh crap. Yeah, absolutely.
I was
It
talking
it's
about
very much.
John earlier, actually, as we were talking about
Oh,
characters, NPCs having normal names when you're like pulling
I
them
love
out.
John. Yeah,
What was his last name?
John
He
was
was.
Blackhammer, I
That's
believe.
what it was. I was like, oh man, something super normal. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. Um, it's hilarious. It's like, isn't John black? Yes. Isn't that a little on the nose? No, it's not what I meant. He used to John used to work as a blacksmith. So his parents basically adopted the name Blackhammer because they were the blacksmiths that hammered on armor and shit. So it's kind of like that occupational
I mean,
name,
that is
that
what it
we have
is. Like,
our IRL.
like Donald Donaldson.
Yeah,
A long line of Donalds. Like,
yeah. So he's John Blackhammer. Like his parents weren't exactly the most creative in naming. They're not exactly the most intelligent people. Like they surround themselves with one type of work and they just stuck with that type of work. And John was very much so the type of person who ended up being like, I am so bored. Please let me do anything else. Just let me do anything else. And he just left.
amazing.
Yeah. Oh, John. But yeah, he's a super normal guy. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, so the fact that he was a paladin and he's got like
Paladin powers.
probably, yeah, he's very much so the what was the dynamic of like
Well, he was a himbo in the
he
group,
was he was the himbo in the group, but he was the type of person that would always flirt with you and like make you kind of off kilter.
but also never follow
So,
through.
but never follow through. So when and if somebody flirted back, he would have no idea what to do. He would just like, haha, that's so funny. Haha.
So he's me, is
uh,
what you're saying.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he'd be completely like flustered and just back off immediately and stop because it's like I have no idea what to do past this point. Like no one's ever done anything with any of this past this point. Most people just kind of shrugged it off because you're super weird. Go away, please. And this one's not doing that.
All
Yeah,
right.
John was great. That was great.
I'm previewing the cover character. I have not aligned her yet. This is the Babanshi, which is the character that I wrote all the info for, and she'll be featured as the main a villain in the alluring villain things. I'll wrap up here by explaining once again. I'm sure you've all heard the spiel, but I'm Vanessa. I make my comic Radio Silence, which will be updating in less than 2 hours. I with a new page. It is a coming of age story, a drama about a British rock band's rise to fame. Uh, Down there on the bottom is the link, the URL, and what you have seen me been working on these past couple hours is an NPC pack. My second one, my first one's already out. It's all townsfolk. There's a if you're a DM and just need tokens, there's one with portraits and tokens only, and then there's the bigger pack that has a PDF with stats and tables that you can roll on, special food items and magic items and such that you can pull out if anybody like in your party, especially friendly with them. Um, Same goes for this. Once I have the 15 characters finished, you've seen all of them now. Then I will be putting the pack together for the tokens and a PDF pack with information and stats, and those will be available on Coffee and Roll20. And if you follow me up there, there's uh, one of my social medias. I'm sure I will let you know when they launch. And yeah, so check out my webcomic, check out my other work. I have also designed official D&D merch, dice bags and such. If you want to be hooked up with some of those, go to my page. My my Twitter, most of all, has that kind of information. And yeah, I appreciate everyone coming out. Appreciate you showing up, R, to make this a little more lively, a little more energetic, as you said. Because I was mellow, talking about D&D before, which
Look,
is
I made you
another
lose most of
vibe.
your viewers. Haha.
Yeah, thanks a lot for showing up, guys. I'll see you next time.